사진이바 송축의 상여로 정한테 가서서 뒤에 노는 내가 나세기야 단동 송축의 상동 내가 전조 송축 상이야는 단동 송축의 상의 가서 있어봐 다 전조 송축의 상 하게라 담보 내가 라는 남주대 그거를 담보 담로 선지지랑 그 저월 랑 다외진지 그런 거 잡아라마 코스 지동담바 샤른좀보동담바 특별히 밤에 이제 선지당지라고 나상도 요요 상대는 라마라 소한데.
So we're right in the middle of the explanations of how to give rise to and how to nurture the enlightened attitude, that which is commonly known as Bodhicitta. We have heard the preliminary parts, and we have already moved into the second part of the explanation from among the 7 parts of mind training, which is the actually giving rise of to Bodhicitta itself. As we have heard now in previous instructions, there are 2 types or 2 ways of training in this. First, we have heard a brief explanation about how to train in Bodhicitta in accord with true reality. And what follows now is the explanation of how to train in Bodhicitta in accord with the world of phenomena and appearances. As we have also previously heard, we start each and every session out by way of first praying fervently to our root teacher. We do this, as has been explained in the preliminary session, by way of imagining how our teacher is truly present above our heads, seated upon a 1,000-petaled lotus flower with a moon disk, how he sits there with a smiling expression full of objectless compassion, meaning compassion, loving kindness that is extended equally towards all beings. From the bottoms of our hearts, we proceed to pray to our teacher in this way and proceed from there.
Lama Rangajo Sonema Pet, Maranga Hingade, Vercado, Naya, Rongin, and Yola, Gongo, Seka Kasiba, Teta was the over Tigi Usa, then Rangatawa Lama de Yo Usa.
Having in this way imagined our teachers above our heads, seated upon the lotus and moon seat, we now proceed to imagine how he dissolves into ourselves, how he enters into our own body through the crown of our heads, and how he slowly descends down to the level of our hearts, where he comes to rest inside a five-colored sphere of light, which is roughly egg-shaped, open towards the top. He sits there in our heart in this way, in a cross-legged position.
Ganzo Songju de San Shabata de Saki Nibag Noni, Ganzo Songju de San Gambala, Songjo, Saki number, Songjo, Tambo Dangza, then Lo Jongzak, Yurgi, Senkin, then Nibadella, then Muja, Lo Jangake, Tap, then Sumbadella, then Lo Jongzan, Tansonge, then Sawat, Songjo. Tombo Mandrola Sopa Kongtar Sela, Tatambuga, Kala Tenga Mandrola Namjo, Tenga Mandro, Lodo number Yala Sopala, and Toson Kiba, Tekondo Somni.
So, as has been said, we find ourselves now at the beginning of the second topic from among the 7 points of mind training, which is the training in and the giving rise of the enlightened attitude of bodhicitta, as it is in accord with the world of appearances and phenomena. And looking at that topic, this is explained under 3 subheadings. First, there is that which is to be trained in, which could also be called that which has to be purified. Then second, there again is the main part. And third, there is the activities between meditation sessions. First, as we have already been told, we start out with the preliminaries of the Guru Yoga practice, as we have already done. And then we concern ourselves with those objects towards whom we are supposed to be practicing this bodhicitta, towards whom we are supposed to be extending this, which are, in general, all the beings within this world.
Tonglen, yeah, Samsara Gong Gudi, Tayong Toma, Rong Zava, Ma, then the Yapar Mays, Tonglen, the Pena, then a Godon, Sundula, Kedong Jaka, Yena, Bull. Chongdong Po, Rangi Lins, Zambu Gachatan, Sentin Tanki, Pa Tang. Zambo Main Bagay Chatanki, Tanaranga to Lamberseva, Tatami, Tendiores. The Retangi, Yeti Kana Gongona, then Sambadu Ninji. Good, Sentin Tanki, then Sambadu Ninji the Gambures. Tenente Gomberg Yola, Thomas Tatangaro, Le Tambo Pata, Yena, the Sankin Tangila, Gom Togumari. Maranga Magave, Drala Sopa, Gegla Sopa, Rona, Nepasepe Yola, Le Tambo Patangi, Gom Togumari. Tatela Tena, Tambola, Tene, Le Tambo Patangi, Gom Le Havati, Ronga, Ma, Danda Yaparme, Maruka, Abba, Yana Maruka, Ama. Yanangaranga, Podum, Pomo, Yanangaranga, Trodum, Chumala, so Tanaruki, Senseva, don't then be your and Tindantana Yopa.
Having concluded all the preliminary parts, as have already been explained beforehand, we then move into the actual practice of giving rise to and nurturing the enlightened attitude of bodhicitta as it is in accord with the world of appearances and phenomena. This is being done by way of actually putting this into practice in such a way that before we can actually start out with the actual exchanging of ourselves with others, this practice which is commonly known as sending and taking, that we first have to give rise to loving kindness and compassion in the first place. Without having concerned ourselves with these, without having given rise to these, at least to a certain extent, exchanging ourselves for others, exchanging all our joy and happiness for the suffering and pain of others is just not possible. Therefore, we first have to start out to contemplate loving kindness and compassion, and then proceed to practice this practice of exchanging, of sending and taking. Now, it goes without saying that as the vast majority of us are beginners upon this path, we will find it difficult initially to extend our loving kindness and compassion towards all beings, not a single one excluded. Therefore, we are advised to start out with small steps and first extend our compassion, our kindness, our bodhicitta to such persons, to such people who are near, who are dear to us. For instance, our mother of this present life, or whoever else we consider the dearest person. We consciously choose a person for whom we will find it easy to give rise to such loving kindness and compassion, and eventually we will then extend that to others. But we start out with such small steps, practicing loving kindness and compassion towards them, only to later on incorporate other objects as well. This is the way how we start out, and having given rise to this practice, then eventually we will learn how to exchange ourselves for others. As it is being said in the teachings of the Kadampa Geshes, the practice of sending and taking, of exchanging ourselves for others, is simply the practice of taking all of this pain and suffering upon ourselves and exchanging it with all of our joy and happiness which we give to them.
Ngarang jewa len chani, teni ngarang la, teni tangboni, teni samata, gu zang, teni kanga yo marwa, yena amanti ke kala oma la so samati, yu la gu yo, teni kadang la so pe mzangwa tangji, amaka pa zangma si, mzangwa tangji si, teni zangbo tangji la, teni yade si che chani, teni labra la so pa la ame ke tangni, teni zombu ke sawa habza tang, teni habza la soba tang. Teni nemba sawa tangji teni cheju yo mare sa ami ke habza jat nemba tangji le do. Ta tenda wa tin pe ma ti tsewa chenbu ke chang yo le.
Should we decide to first focus upon our own mothers of this lifetime as the object towards whom we extend our bodhicitta, our loving kindness and compassion, then we could think of our mother along the following lines, reminding ourselves of the great kindness that she has consistently shown us. Even while our mothers were pregnant with us, already they underwent great difficulties. They felt all kinds of feelings of nausea, they felt sick, they suffered from heat and cold, from hunger and thirst, and all the various difficulties that a woman undergoes during pregnancy. And then she eventually gave birth to us. We came into this birth completely alone, naked. We had neither clothes nor food, nor were we able to take care of ourselves in any which way. The first person who did so for us in a kind way was our mother. She was the one who clothed us. She was the one who fed us. She was the one who cleaned us when we soiled ourselves, either which way. And she was the one who initially brought us up, teaching us the initial steps in this world, teaching us how to behave, teaching us what is good to adopt, teaching us what is to avoid, etc. She kept all sorts of harm from us, and she was the first one who led us the way in this world of ours, which we had yet to discover. Therefore, the first person in this world that we came into contact with and who showed us kindness is, or was, indeed our mother.
Rinpoche 자기 추적도 해봐 생도 전체에서 다당할 아메리카 수입의 줄을 되네 다당하러 손지게 담비 도로쇼 라마 계획이 상신자 지ren다는 당화 제발제 당지 더 다들 당화된 아론 그 냠소리 연반데 수게 가지나 되네나 다와다 아메리카인.
So eventually out of infanthood and childhood we have grown up, we became educated to some extent, and we have come to the point that we actually should know what to do, what is right and what is wrong, at least ways we should do so. We were on top of this in the fortunate position to have met the teaching of the Buddha, the Dharma, to have met authentic teachers who are able to lead us on the Dharma path, who are able to point out and explain all these teachings to us, and in this way we are able to progress along these lines. The one who initially made this possible, with whom everything started out with in the first, is none other but our mother. It's the kindness of our mother that has enabled us to be in this fortunate position in the first place.
Tendawa Chuyong Daba Drake, Tendra Yang Dapan Driba, Tea Capsule, Tangaroto, Ninduton, Zendula, Junzi, Google, and so on.
As the great master of all yogins, Milarepa, has said, this illusory body, nurtured and brought up by our mothers, and the authentic teaching, the authentic Dharma of the victorious ones, have made their connection. However, it is of essential necessity, of essential importance, that we make an exerted effort training ourselves in these. So again, he says much the same things in these words. We have been brought into this world by our mother, we have been brought up, etc., through the kindness of our mothers, and through the kindness of our mothers, we have been enabled to meet this authentic Dharma, this authentic teaching of the victorious ones. Nevertheless, that in itself is not sufficient. We ourselves have to make an exerted effort to train ourselves in this teaching. Simply having met the teaching in itself won't do any good. We have to train ourselves in it, and this is what we have to do. Now this sequence of having been born into this world by a mother, having experienced her kindness, having benefited from her kindness and grown up, etc., into the beings that we then became, that is an experience that did not only happen once throughout our lifetimes, but many times. Since beginningless time, and there's no way we could say when this cycle of endless rebirths has started. Since beginningless time, we have been born again and again and again. We have again and again experienced the kindness of the mother, and of course of the father for that matter as well. And we have in limitless and innumerable lifetimes experienced the kindness of all of these various mothers. And this is an experience that has been repeated innumerable times.
then don't like Chima, making Chima, Sajo, jump to Chamber Tangi or song. That day into Java Drime, but the gods has long. Then Java did the land, going to Shuban, then Amagat, Jammy, then
If we should think along these lines of all the innumerable lifetimes that we have come through until the present moment, throughout which, all of which we have consistently been dependent upon the kindness of our mothers, upon the kindness of other beings, then, as it is said in the instructions of the Great Compassionate One, if we were to bring all the bones and the flesh of our previous bodies together, there would be a heap larger than the highest of mountains, larger than the greatest mountain range. If we were to bring all the blood and all the tears that we have cried together in all of our individual lifetimes, one after the other, this would fill an inconceivably vast ocean. In this way, the number of our having been reborn again and again is utterly inconceivable. And in all of these lifetimes, we have consistently been dependent upon the kindness of others.
Ama senjin tangji tata kowa la chong ne dongan na soba nyongan ta tena nyong yinpa re te tawe ke tene magin senjin te tangji hingye chao to gong re.
Thinking along these lines, we might think about what has happened to all of these countless beings who have been our loving and kind mothers in previous lifetimes. What has become of them? Thinking of all the deeds that they had to perform, just in order to have us grow up, to nurture us, to protect us from harm, thinking of all the admittedly negative deeds that they probably have performed, just to keep harm from us, to protect us and to show their kindness to us, and how, as a result of such harmful doing, they are now still somewhere within this cycle of existence. If we think of this simple fact, well, that indeed should give us cause to give rise to great compassion from the bottom of our heart. Here and there are occasionally people who would refute all of this and who would say, in my particular case, this was not the case. My mother has been harsh to me. My mother has been giving me a difficult time since I can remember. My mother has not been loving and kind to me. Well, be that as it may, occasionally, of course, as we all know, there are such mother beings who behave in such ways. But if one looks at it, if one looks at the vast majority of all of these beings which act as mothers, then these are usually the exception to the rule. Usually it is the duty of a mother, and which is usually happily fulfilled by that mother, to nurture us, to protect us, to show us kindness, and to do whatever is within her possibility to protect us from harm and to make sure that we can grow up properly and safely. Now, even if we were to look around ourselves, just in the world that we can experience, that we can see with our eyes, for instance, also the animal realm, also at that particular time, the mothers have been particularly kind to their young. For instance, look at such fierce and carnivorous animals as tigers or lions. They lovingly protect their cubs against all sorts of dangers. They might be fierce towards others. They might hunt down and kill other beings in order to feed them to their young or to eat themselves in order to be able to nurture their young in whatever way, but they will show kindness for the most part to their own young. For instance, there are these beautiful pictures and movies of the wildlife in Africa, and as everybody knows, the largest animal there is the elephant. We all have seen such movies where there are large hordes of elephants walking for many hours towards the next river to drink and to bath, and there's usually the large elephants leading and the young baby elephants trailing behind. And whenever they have found such a place where they can rest, where they can drink, where they can bath, then it is the large elephant, the mother elephants, and the leaders of that pack who then raise their tusks and make a big noise so that all the other animals who are there, like for instance fierce carnivorous animals like leopards or lions, etc., so that all of them take flight and go for shelter somewhere in order to make space for the elements. In such a way, even elephants protect their young to make sure that no harm befalls them. Now, when we actually proceed to the actual session, the actual training in giving rise to bodhicitta, to loving kindness and compassion, talking about training, meditation practice, meditation session in general, we usually imagine some sort of a deity that's sitting somewhere up there in the skies on lotus flowers, wearing all sorts of ornaments and crowns, having so many faces, hands, etc. At this particular point, we do no such thing. The sole object upon which we concentrate during this kind of practice is none other but our own mother. We imagine our mother, the mother of this lifetime, in front of ourselves. We think of all the kindness that she has shown us, all the difficulties that she has taken upon us to protect us from harm, to show us kindness, to feed us, to nurture us. And we also think of all the many unskillful things that she saw necessary to do in order to protect us from all the shortcomings of life, etc., and of all the suffering that consequently she will undergo because of all of these deeds. Thinking in this way, we then give rise to love and compassion towards all of these mother beings. That is the training that we have to put into practice when it comes to the giving rise and nurturing of bodhicitta.
Senjin Tangji la gam. That Senjin Tangji jam, then Naranga Ama no Yinge. Then Narankia Lambekas, Ala Zevike, Jam, Naranga Tando, Dipa Mandrawa, Mumbo Saw. They do then Maru Amadon, Kipa Tava, and this on it and Tambo, Kilawa, and Zahi, Naruke, Toponda, Naranga, and Gaveke, Tonda, and Naranga, Yindindo, Tendrila Gong.
Having trained ourselves in this way in order to give rise to some initial kindness and compassion towards our mothers, we would then proceed to extend our kindness and compassion towards those who are near and dear to us, all the various other relatives, friends, loved ones, partners, whatever they might be, in whatever relationship they might be with us, we gradually extend our kindness and compassion towards these as well. On top of that, we also take into account those towards whom we naturally feel kindness and compassion, those who are in need of help, those who are sick, who are handicapped in any which way. So in this way, we proceed to slowly extend that kindness and compassion of ours, first from this single object of our own mothers towards more and more beings, and eventually we then extend our loving kindness and compassion towards all beings. I forgot to say before, when we start to extend our kindness and compassion towards others, from initially our mothers towards other beings, then we should take into account that all of these beings invariably have been our mothers in previous lifetimes and have shown us the same kindness that our present life's mother has shown us. Therefore, they are equally deserving of our kindness and compassion. Now, having trained ourselves in this way, we then slowly proceed to extend our compassion towards others, and we could also take into account those who we do not know, who are not loved ones, who are not close ones, even those beings which we cannot even perceive. We could, for instance, remind ourselves of the most intense suffering of heat and cold that hell beings undergo. We could remind ourselves of the most intense suffering of hunger and thirst which hungry ghosts undergo, and the intense suffering of beings born in the animal realm, of being enslaved and killed and eaten, etc. All of these beings we could take into account and extend our compassion towards them. We could also extend our compassion and kindness towards those beings within this human realm whom we can very well perceive, who are unfortunate in whatever regard, who might be handicapped in any such way that they cannot take care of themselves, that they cannot get up, that they cannot walk, that they cannot take food themselves. Or we might just take into account those who are lonely, without friends, who suffer intensely from that particular lack. And we could also extend our kindness and compassion towards those, eventually, who at present seem to be all right, who seem to have a very fortunate life, who seem to enjoy all kinds of pleasures, but who, as a result of their previous unskillful doing, will experience suffering in the future. So even though they are still in a most fortunate position, experiencing happiness and joy of whatever kind, eventually suffering will come for them as well. So we could already give rise to compassion and kindness for whatever suffering it is that they're going to undergo in the future. Gradually trained ourselves in extending our kindness and compassion towards all of these beings. We're still not done. We still have to learn how to extend this towards all of those whom are harmful or whom we experience as harmful. Those who are harsh towards us, those who do not bring us any benefit, but rather bring us harm. All of these harmbringers, all of these obstacle makers of whatever type. There are, on the one hand, those who very concretely within this lifetime, for instance, strive to steal our possessions, strive to bring about whatever other sort of harm for us. Also, they are deserving of our kindness and compassion. And then there are these great forces within this universe, which, for instance, might make hindrances for our Dharma practice, for progressing along the path of the Dharma, etc. All of these may arise as enemies, may arise as undesirable factors. Nevertheless, they are equally deserving of our kindness and compassion as those near to us. So eventually, we then learn how to extend kindness and compassion to all of these beings, not only those who are near and dear, but also those whom we would initially regard as enemies, who bring us harm, who cause us obstacles. Now, if we take all of these various types of beings into account, near ones as well as harmbringers and obstacle makers, and all the different kinds of conceivable beings in between these two extremes, we might look at them and we might think to ourselves, what is it that drives all of these beings? What is it that they want? What is it that they wish to avoid? And invariably, we will come to the conclusion that all of these beings wish happiness. But to the same extent as they wish happiness, they're ignorant about how to bring happiness about. All of these beings wish to avoid suffering. But again, to the same extent as they wish to do so, they are ignorant of how to avoid suffering. Rather, they perform deeds which are designed to bring about happiness, yet, because of the influence of their ignorance, bring about nothing else but suffering. Even though they strive to bring about happiness for themselves and theirs, they do all kinds of things which in the end bring about nothing but suffering, pain, etc. All of these beings are basically under the influence of this ignorance of what it is that brings about happiness and what it is that avoids suffering. That being the case, thinking about this fact truly being so, may serve to give rise to kindness and compassion within ourselves. If we look at all of these beings in such a way, thinking along these lines, then we might start to think, what is it that I could do in order to bring about the happiness that they wish, and in order to bring about the protection from all the suffering that they wish to avoid? What is it that I personally could do so that I could bring about their welfare in a lasting and efficient way? Regarding all of these beings again and again in such a way, and giving rise to kindness and compassion based on the fact that we see and understand how they are ignorant of how to bring this about for themselves, we could remind ourselves of this fact, of these points again and again, until such a point when the feeling of wanting to help others, of doing something truly efficient for the welfare of others, becomes almost unbearable.
사교 통지 세마 책송만라고 된지 다 대라 배도 되니 정체 전부 정체 차요래 되니 대인도 되나 차요게 동안 전부 요래 되니 여도 저 sen나게 요라 되니 여도 개와롱아 대라 되니 차요 동안 전부 요래 아니 바바까지 야가선 인더나 추지 가봐 요래 제 버리 아니 여도 문자와 뭐뭐 가도 나쁘지 좁도 다 된다와 되니 여도 뭐뭐 해병네 아 내손들라 개와롱네 로몽보연 촌통조도 파 다쇼네 저个门长长的토마송 다다리 기회 전부 책 내서라 추신 나누지 추신 나누지 단리 종행 단리요.
To exemplify the sufferings of beings, there's a story of one of the students of the Buddha, the Arhat Katyayana, who was highly developed in his practice and who could therefore travel to all kinds of regions in the world and also to all kinds of realms which are not necessarily within this world. For instance, once he traveled to the realm of the hungry ghosts. When he got there, he found a landscape that was rather less inviting. It was like a burned desert. There were no trees, there was no grass, everything was just sand. And eventually, as he was walking around the world of the hungry ghosts, then he came upon a place that gave the appearance of being a city. It was extremely hot in this place, and it is said that one of the reasons why hungry ghosts, among all the other sufferings, also undergo the great suffering of heat, is that they have been full of avarice in their previous lives. A direct result of avarice is the suffering of intense heat. And as he arrived there, probably quite hot himself, he then came into this city and he asked around for some water. He wanted to be given a drink of water. And instantly lots of these hungry ghost beings gathered around him. They were not at all nice to look at. They had dark, swarthy bodies. They were clearly undergoing great suffering, and they looked at him with their sunken eyes and said, "What is it that you want? You want water? Not only have we lived for centuries in this place without ever having seen any water, we have not even heard the word water. So you, great exalted being, having come here, please be kind to us. Please give us some of that water."
파파라 휴네 당나랑게 초라데 사만라고 토병와 선는 로송 다처럼 사만 토병은 제 응응지 당나랑 보고 담기간가 다 신로도.
Among all of these hungry ghosts who addressed the Arhat Katyayana, there was also a female who had many children, and she implored him. She said, "My husband has gone away a long time ago in order to find some food for the family, in order to feed our children, but he has not returned since. Now it looks as if all my children are going to die."
아니 파파까지 앞에 선 여도 뭐 잠사지게 노 되는 메시지 전부 다네 카도 나쁘지 다네 샤탐지 바 감성은 된다와지 요래 다티처럼 아마 저게 나라 차시 고정처럼 임배서 어때 팀메티 다 말아요. 다 저런 데서 사만다 톱요나 다 용노지마도 보고 담지간가 뭐이 셔로도 단지 라브도 되는 나 사마 추네 되는 예 림보의 사마 토용산의 추리인데 사마 잔이 토마송 니마제라 되는 개롱제게 되는 나라고 전지제 방네 대여도라 토파르초 만남지 답송 다 대라 되는 여도 공소 강가 대라 되는 어렵 잡네 되는 대 사정나로 톱소 대마도 장 토마송.
Katyayana went on, moved on within the world of the hungry ghosts, and after a while he came upon a place where a great many hungry ghosts had assembled. Among them there was one who was slightly larger than the others. Nevertheless, he was equally emaciated, and he talked to him. He said, "Aren't you the one who was supposed to bring some food to that mother of many children back in the other place where it just come from?" And this hungry ghost said to him, "Indeed, that is me. But I have been wandering around aimlessly for years and years and years, and I couldn't find any food or drink anywhere whatsoever. Only at a single occasion many years ago, there was a bhikshu, a fully ordained monk, who flicked away the snot from his nose, combined with the wish that we hungry ghosts may partake of it. And as this then appeared in our world, there were so many of us, and the fight for this was so great that I managed to receive only a tiny little bit of it. That is the only nourishment I have been able to find in all of these years.
And Senji Tangji, Umpunga Doma, Hiawashu. Senji Tangji, La Sana, Jachambo, Yumashu, Tendica, Manan Tani, Puna, then Mubo, Cheshon and Tani Yoma.
Such is the suffering in the world of the hungry ghosts brought upon themselves by avarice and the like. Knowing this now, we would be well advised to occasionally train ourselves in generosity. If, for instance, we come upon a beggar somewhere, we might give that beggar some money or some food or whatever we have at our disposal at this particular moment. And also, particularly, to perform offerings to the three jewels in the form of, for instance, pure water or a small stick of incense or a flower is extremely beneficial. If we combine this wish with the bringing about, if we make such an offering with the wish that suffering may be alleviated, merit, benefit for the sacred beings may be brought about, then this will be a very meaningful and a very efficient offering. And in this way we will avoid such suffering of such extreme hunger, thirst and poverty, etc., etc. for ourselves.
And Ulmu say nor can never change any Pumiki Yore. Tade Morunima Tapa, Tronjala, Senyamtin and Rogu. Then Yamajala, Senyamtin and Rodu, that makes the dodging Semates as a Jeva, Sema. Then is Sema Pava gon Tovareta. That demo Sema Pava gon the Cor Leund, that's Sunji Lani, Pound. I don't give a mamma, send on Massa, Utpujuma. I don't keep on my sending that on Dandawa and Utpu Mumbo. Then they ended the sending Tonki, Umpunga, Doman Shawa, Sanam, Soto Bichida, Tatarina, Sema the Songi, Pugo and those, then a Songi, Sema the check or do, and then Sema Dopo here, and then Hunzik and on the one. Tela Tenny, Jawajima. Kulujove Jabuki Jasi, Tipumiti, and Kulujove Jasi get tops on mine. They ended the Jumbo, Sema Yamato, Yomarete, Yena, Kalhontella, and Sanjay Tangi, Dona Shawa, Sanjay Tangi, Umpunga, Sana, Soda, and Kalhon Jachambola, then Tenda and Jill Top Chamber.
There's another story which exemplifies how even a small deed can bring about a great result. There's a story of a beggar woman who lived at the time of the Buddha and who met the Buddha at the time when he was living around, when he was wandering around the town of Vaishali. As the Buddha and his monks were going on their daily begging rounds, so also this beggar woman every day went into the town in order to beg, in order to get together the livelihood for that particular day, and she repeated this continuously. At this particular time, the Buddha and his monks were there, they were doing so likewise, and she realized at this moment that she had very obviously not been practicing much virtue in previous lifetimes, let alone generosity, so that therefore in this particular lifetime she was undergoing the intense suffering of poverty. On top of that, she reminded herself that not only I undergo the suffering of such poverty, there are countless other beings who also suffer in the very same way. Therefore, it is necessary to bring an end to this, to accumulate some merit. Just shortly before she came upon the Buddha and his monks, she had been given a handful of peas. And with the purest of motivations, she then thought to herself, in order to bring about an end of the suffering of poverty for myself and all other beings in this world who suffer equally, I offer these peas to the Buddha. And thinking in this way, she threw them into the air. And indeed, 4 of these peas landed inside the begging bowl of the Buddha himself. And it is said that consequently, in a later lifetime, she was then born as a universal emperor, a Chakravartin king, with all the power and influence and immeasurable wealth that such a king had at his disposal. Now, the interesting point here to take note of is that the actual offering that she presented was completely irrelevant. There were just a handful of peas, of which only 4 landed in the Buddha's begging bowl, so there was not much in the way of material offering that she presented. It was the vast intention with which she presented the offering which made the difference. And in this way, this shows very clearly how even a small offering, a small, seemingly insignificant deed can bring about a great benefit if the motivation, the underlying attitude is the right one. So if there are any questions, we have a few moments.